Hey folks, welcome back to another episode of Straight Talk Whiskey. Once again, I'm Nick, and this is episode number 36. Thanks for joining us this week. Last week we did Green Spot, a single pot still Irish whiskey, and so now we're going up, next step up to Yellow Spot, as promised, which is the 12-year version. And it's aged a little bit differently. So it's a 3-cask maceration. What we have is bourbon cask, sherry cask, and the Malaga wine cask. Same thing, triple distilled, and all that business. But then, if you didn't tune in last week, single pot still Irish whiskey is basically malted and unmalted barley put together, sort of the traditional Irish whiskey making process that was involved way back hundreds and hundreds of years ago, sort of to evade some of the outrageous taxes that were being imposed by the British Crown on whiskey. So what you had back then was a lot of, illegal whiskey distilling, but for those that were even licensed, adding some unmalted barley was a way to make things a little bit cheaper because the tax was on the malted barley itself. So, there you have it. Let's take her out of the box here. It's a lovely little tin here. And it's got, compared to the Green Spot that we had reviewed last week, it does have a lot, I would say, additions onto it that make it an even more superior Irish whiskey, and those things are, we'll start with the proof. So it's bottled at 46% alcohol by volume percentage. So you have the 92 proof, which is wonderful. And also, if you look on here, if you have a bottle, non-chill filter. We love that. I didn't see that on the Green Spot, which was interesting. So, just sort of peculiar, why they did it for this. Obviously the price for this is much higher than the Green Spot, so maybe they felt as if that was going to add some value to the whiskey, which, from a composition-wise take on it, of making whiskey, I always stick to, the non-chill filtering as, being far superior to chill filtering, because it filters out some of the, the more natural characters and minerals, and that sort of thing that are in the whiskey, that are imparted to it from, the grain distillation process, the water, the cask. So all these sorts of things sort of like play into it together, and I think it's important to leave it as natural as possible. Now, of course, these days, when you start talking about natural and not tampering with things and not diluting it down to the standard 40% ABV, the price obviously goes up. So that's what you have there. So, being bottled at 46%, I do have the old trusty, the water dropper this week, which sometimes gets a bad rap from people. They think that, you have something like this, and it's really down to personal preference, but whether or not you want to add water or not is completely up to you. Basically, the higher the proof is, the more alcohol bite that you're going to get, right? So it's harder to get to those intricate flavors that you might taste. And so try not to think of it as you're diluting down the whiskey. Certainly try it at the higher proof, and then start adding a little bit of water, and with some time, with some patience, you might see things change for the better. And at any rate, it's always interesting to see sort of what that progression is. So, it's worth a shot, it's worth experimenting with, and just adds another, level of complexity to your whiskey tasting. So, we got the nice, pretty standard This little gold color going on in there. Nothing too fancy. Pretty standard there. So the yellow spot is age. On here it says no less than 12 years. So there could be some older whiskey in here, but the minimum drop of whiskey in this bottle is 12 years old. So let's go in for the nose. So what you have initially is just this really vibrant, fragrant, clean, fresh fruits, maybe slightly overripe, some apple, even some, well, there's definitely some peach in there, but some subtle banana added into that too. Definitely getting a lot of notes from the bourbon barrel maturation, so some of the vanillas and toasted wood, toasted oak are coming through. More so than I would say the sherry and Malaga casks. So I'll be interested. I know it's they obviously age it in those 3 casks, but depending on how much time spent in each cask is interesting. It'd be interesting to figure out. So let's go in for a taste. It's definitely got that initial sweetness, but it's not as light as it comes across on the nose. The taste definitely, helped with that 4 to 6% ABV. It's got a nice a spiciness to it going on. You can definitely taste that unmalted barley in there. The mouthfeel is very creamy. It rolls around nicely, but you definitely have bits of pops here and there of the fruits that I talked about. So definitely the peaches, the apple comes in really clearly, especially on the initial entry when you taste it. It's just this nice crisp apple, sort of on maybe like a harsher fall, autumn day apple picking, and you got an apple right off the tree. Sort of thing. Not like it hasn't been sitting around for a while, but it's just right. A nice sort of crisp note to it. But it's definitely a full journey here, because what you get after that, after the initial sweetness and the fruitier notes, you get sort of this very smooth transition into like dark milk chocolate, definitely some coffee notes in there, the vanilla, the toasted oak like I had mentioned from the bourbon cask. Still very interesting that the bourbon barrel maturation is playing a much bigger part than the other 2 casks, which is just neat. But I think it works though, because you have this single pot still character, which is this creaminess, but still the triple distillation, which helps add to the fruitiness. You'll notice a lot of Irish whiskeys, if you paired them against bourbon, which are column distilled for the most part, what you get is sort of you get the heavier with bourbon. You get like the heavier oak, maybe some nuttiness, maybe some dried fruits in there, but more of like cinnamon, nutmeg, the toasted oak, the real toasted oak, where you can sort of even taste the charcoal that's in there from the charring in the barrel. And you pair that against the Irish whiskeys, which are, again, this is just lumping them kind of into a big group, and if we were to give sort of like notes on each category, right? I know there's, as you well know, there's a web of just different places that you can go within each category. So the Irish whiskeys can go anywhere, the bourbons can go anywhere, that sort of thing. But if we were to lump it all together, contrasting to the bourbon, with Irish whiskeys, you have the sweeter, the fresher, crisper fruitier notes, and you have like the honey, some very floral notes, like fresh cut grass is definitely in there. And that's not to say that you're going to go outside and you're not going to be able to tell, oh, I don't eat grass, so I wouldn't know what that tastes like. It's not talking about that. It's just like the sensory sort of experience that you get from fresh cut grass. So just getting back to that. Now I am going to add a little bit of water to this, just to see if anything changed. Now I'm not going to add a ton, and with this I can sort of get how many drops I want in there, which is just a few, like three drops there. And so if you haven't watched the earlier videos, I always suggest when you're using water, I would get a Brita or some sort of filter. I'm not advertising for Brita. That's just what I have. Just to make sure you're starting with some good water, and you could use a teaspoon or something like that. Just do little drops, drop by drop. Take your time with it. And also the temperature of the water is different. I poured this last night so that it could sort of get to room temperature, because initially I had it in my refrigerator, so it's really cold. So what that tends to do if you put it in the whiskey is you might get a sort of numbing of the flavors in there, which you don't want. So just get it to room temperature, and you'll be good. You can still get to all the notes and all the flavors without anything being hindered by the coldness of the water. So I'm going to swirl it around a little bit, but we'll just let that rest for a little bit. So some news this week, slightly disturbing. On the Jack Daniel's Facebook page, they announced that they basically announced two new whiskeys, and one was the Jack Daniel's Single Barrel at Barrel Proof, which I found out about months ago, along with the Jack Daniel's Single Barrel Rye whiskey, which I also found out about months ago. And you might have too if you have a magazine subscription to, say, Whiskey Advocate, because there was an ad in there for these whiskeys. So in my opinion, the marketing was already approved to get this advertisement out to say to people that these whiskeys are coming. So I emailed Jack Daniel's about that and about its availability and when they thought it might be in this region, because as you've known, we did a mini series on Jack Daniel's and we did a ton of them. The unaged rye we did the rested rye, and so there was a lot of anticipation to see what the final rye whiskey product from Jack Daniel's was. So I was looking forward to that. Also, the Single Barrel, which we've reviewed, but at Barrel Proof, which I thought was a phenomenal idea. And so those two whiskeys I inquired of Jack Daniel's, and so the email that I got back from one of the customer service representatives, which I won't give out any names, but it was from Jack Daniel's, obviously, that yes, the Jack Daniel's Single Barrel Proof was going to be released. They told me sometime in September. I still haven't seen it. Doesn't mean it's not out anywhere. Just the local stores around me don't seem to have it right now. That could change in the next few weeks. I'm sure a lot of stores and distributors were looking to get that up pretty quick, because I imagine the demand is pretty high for it. So that was fine. Great. But then they proceeded to tell me in the email that the Single Barrel Rye wasn't a thing, that they had not announced that there was a rye coming out. So I said, okay, whatever. Maybe they had thought that, actually I don't know what they thought, really, because I can't rationalize why they would have an ad in a magazine and then come back and deny that it was going to be released at all, or that it even existed yet. They could have said they can't comment on it right now, but they said no, we haven't. There hasn't been any release of that yet. So whatever. A few months went by, right? Because I did this over the summer when I first heard about it, after seeing the ad in the magazine. So on the Facebook page, the Jack Daniel's Single Barrel page, they had a picture of, well, they had 3 whiskeys. They had the single select, I believe, of this year, this year's release, but also had the single barrel rye and the single barrel at barrel proof. And I was astounded because I said, well, you just denied like a month and a half ago that it even existed. So I commented and said, oh, this is great. I'm glad, that it's being released. But I thought it was strange that when I emailed and inquired about it, that they denied that the rye, the single barrel rye, was going to even be a thing, that it was even released. So I started getting a bunch of likes, starting to get some comments on my post in response to that picture. Come to find out, an hour later when I went to check back, it was gone. The post was gone. They had deleted it. And I emailed Jack Daniel's because it really hit me hard, because I have always been a big fan of Jack Daniel's. As you can see, I've reviewed 8 or 9 different Jack Daniel's sort of version. So imagine my shock when they didn't respond to that email, and they haven't since to this day. So we'll see if they do at some point, but it's frustrating as somebody who really enjoys a brand. You get loyal to a brand, and you wanna stand up for them, you wanna support them, you wanna buy the products. But especially when I'm reviewing it for you all, I sort of want to be in the know about what's happening, so I can anticipate, so I can start to save to be able to buy some of these and review them. Because I don't get funding from distilleries or anything like that. I don't review samples or anything. So, I'm in the same boat as the, working class rest of the people watching. So, just a brief thing to kind of talk about. And on a positive note, it has given us some time to let the yellow spot calm down, breathe a little bit after being in the bottle for so long. And so let's see if anything has changed. Initially, what I'm getting now is some more the honey notes that seem to be predominant, with a slight hint of vanilla back there, and then sort of those green apple notes, but a little bit more subdued this time. There's still that raw sort of nuttiness going on in there. The fresh bakery smell, from the malted and unmalted barley single pot still content in here, which is just lovely. Like I said, it's just, it blows my mind to me that they can, you can combine so many different flavors. And certainly, if you taste this, you'll have some similar notes that you've discovered, or you might have completely new ones, which is interesting. But there's so many different compartments of flavor, really, and it's just wonderful. I think they've Mitchell & Sons, who have aged this and produced this, and Middleton, that has distilled it, done a very fine job. And I imagine it is pretty close to what the original used to be, because I believe that they have found original distiller notes on this, so they do have a bit to go on when they created this. But just a really modern reinterpretation, recreation of a very historical whiskey. Mm. Interesting now. What's starting to develop, sort of this creaminess, which is supporting this banana note that I'm getting in there, which is really interesting for a whiskey. I don't think I've really tasted that in any other whiskey thus far. But the banana note is definitely there. It's more of a slightly overripe banana, so it's not like a fresh. Well, it's still fresh, but it's not like the slight twinge of green still in there, where it's sort of crunchy in a way, but it's something that it's just past ripe and it's really got this nice texture to it. And also, this is balanced with a coffee note that's in there. And very earthy, very robust flavor going on in there. This is wonderful. There's so much to get from this that you could spend an hour going through all of it. And it is sort of hard to explain because there's so much going on in there. You have the red apples that are also coming through. They're still there. This creamy milk chocolatey-ness going on to it, this toasted oak. And it's still got, even after adding some water and letting it sit for just a little bit, it's still got this nice spiciness to it. There's still substantialness to it. It's got body. And it really stands on its own two legs even after adding some water to it. So I believe even at 12 years old, where it's a little bit more delicate with how much water you want to put in, but it can take the heat, really. So if you want to experiment and leave it for a little bit, check it every 15 minutes or so, see what's changed, add some water, don't add some water, kind of do whatever you want to experiment with, if you can get your hands on a bottle of this. Like I said, I really hope they come out with the red and blue spot at some point in the next few years. I think it'd be great. And I think they could definitely get away with, getting the younger spot whiskey out there. Because I know they have to use this, the spirit that they get, and age it so that they have enough quality to fill the 12 and 7 to 10 year aged whiskey. That's the green spot, 7 to 10 years, as we talked about last week. So they do have, originally there was a 15-year-old version of this, which may be, sitting back there in the warehouse getting ready to be bottled as such. But in the meantime, I think they could do the younger spot, which would be awesome. And I'm sure as this gains popularity, which it already has a pretty big fan base now, that's only going to prompt them, to do so. So let's go in for a score, because me, I usually forget about it. Because they're sort of ambiguous. It's sort of up to each person. But let's just go for the gusto here. And so, episode number 36, Yellow Spot, 12-year-old, single pot, still Irish whiskey. I'm going to give it a 98 out of 100, which some people will be like blown out of their seat if they're watching. But it is that good. It's just amazing. And I'm only leaving a few points there, for something to come in and, beat it. You got to leave the window open. So, for episode number 36, I'm Nick. Thanks for watching once again. We'll see you next week with something interesting. And, as always, drink responsibly, and have a great week. We'll see you next time.